This is not a Batrep. A bad day in Ostermark.
When the world was very young, a group of nomads drifted north into the icy steppes, where they tamed wild dogs to help herd wild boar, long-horned cattle and goats, which they raised for food and clothing. When the gate of heaven collapsed, chaos was released into our world, saturating the people of the north. The loosed energy of chaos melded these poor, simple folk with their herds and other animals, warping them into the beastmen we recognize today.
Dwarf myth, describing how the first beastmen came to be. Raise your flagons and quaff yourself a mouthful in memory of our fallen comrade, Onlaug. He stood where many would have fled, and fought against an overwhelming foe until he could fight no more.
I have, and I will, continue to drink deep in honor of my own brother Ergen, my most eminent thane. But before I quaff another mouthful, why don't you tell us how he died? Lest it is my blade, and not me, that gets thirsty and waiting to hear the tale from that vacuous mouth of yours.
Karak, my comrade, I know, you are grieving, and I know it is loss that drives the fire of your words, and so I begrudge them not. But rest your ire, and rest your weapon, brother of honourable Onlaug. I will tell all now. May the truth of my telling quench your misplaced anger. Deployment. We found ourselves on a hillock east of the woods of the Umgi lands of Ostermark. We were there as a small guard for the engineer Gertok Greycrag. He's been refining the mechanism of his organ gun, and he wanted to test it out. Ha! Fool of an engineer! He got more of a test than he bargained for. There weren't many of us. Gertok was accompanied by 6 of his young protégés, bearing handguns, each eager to test their aim. Your brother, Onlaug, was with us too. He led 8 young warriors, and they certainly were young. All but beardlings, in fact. I stood with them. I listened to their banter. Their hearts were strong. Their blades were sharp, but they were yet to be sharp in instinct. Yet to have the dullness of hearth and home ground out of them by the millstone of battle and war. It began with howling, soon followed by panting. Onlaug spotted them first, off to our left. A quintet of warped hounds, twisted, slavering dogs of the Dark Pantheon, and they were not alone. Behind them, we heard the battle horn of their warherd. A filthy collection of beastmen. There were perhaps around 24 gore, a few less maybe, a handful of ungore with short bows, another quintet of warped hounds on the far flank, and the whole filthy bunch was led by what looked like a Bray shaman on a chariot, pulled by the fiercest looking boars I've ever had the displeasure of laying my eyes on. From the off, we were taken by surprise and heavily outnumbered. The battle. The entirety of the enemy immediately lolloped towards us, with the dogs and the chariot covering the longest distance, ready to pounce upon our lines. Grey Crag's thunderers shot at the nearest Chaos Hounds as they skulked behind a hedge, but alas, the cover meant that only 2 fell to their well-aimed shots. The organ gun, too, fired at a large block of gore, and although it didn't misfire, there was no hail of fire either. More smattering of shots that only felled 2 beastmen. 2 beastmen too few. Onlaug and I led our warriors forwards, ready to meet the enemy on open ground, but we both knew that things were already looking grim. For starters, the warped beasts would be on us in moments. The nearest trio of surviving dogs were unfazed and ungrazed by the thunderous fire, and tore into them. Grey Crag's doughty protégés bashed and thwacked at the ravenous jaws of the horrible hounds, but one of our boys, Bregnid, was severely wounded in the first few seconds of the melee and collapsed. Shock wrought across his face. It was then the other beastmen's turn to respond to our gunfire, and they responded in kind. The skulking Ungor fired off arrows at us warriors, causing young Dulgren and Norbrek to fall. Lucky shots finding chinks in their armour. Damn our luck! All was against us. But the roar of battle drew allies to our side, as the old prospector, Zaldor Rocksworn. Are you here, Zaldor? Aye. And 4 of his miners suddenly appeared from behind us. Zaldor, what were you even doing there?
Hi-ho, great Thane, but it was simply home from work we were to go, when the sound of battle drew us to your side.
I see. Praise Grimnir, you appeared. Meanwhile, Gertok got his organ gun to take aim at the oncoming Bray Shaman's chariot. Again, though, it disappointed, just cracking off a few parts of it, drawing some blood from the charioteer and pig alike.
Hi-ho, great Thane, but what about us?
Ah, the dogs, eh?
Ah-ho, brothers, aye. No sooner had we joined the fray than we were fixed in place by 5 drooling beasties who charged straight at us from the flank.
Meanwhile, the Beastkin's herd began to close in on the rest of us as Gertok's gunners slowly, far too slowly, beat the other Chaos Hounds to death. But kill them all they did. But as they did, the Ungor again peppered myself, Onlaug, and the other warriors with arrows. The Beardlins, Etruk, Brudor, Metrit, and Orbim fell, wounded, leaving but 4 of us to defend them. And then came the braying and grunting from behind. As more of the cloven ones appeared.
I saw them from the corner of my eye as we redoubled our effort in killing the hounds in front of us off. But they were tougher than they looked.
Aye. With this new threat appearing, Gertok's gunners turned to bring their guns to bear. Shot and missed, whilst Grey Crag himself pointed his organ gun at the large mob of beastmen about to engulf Onlaug and I. It killed a couple more beastmen, but nothing to truly concern them. And then they were upon us. The ambushers to our rear piled onto Gurtok and his war machine, whilst the chariot and the Gore charged us. I could hear the Ungor jeering, or perhaps it's cheering, from the backfield. Gurtok's gunners, they curiously left alone, praise Grimnir. The two gigantic boars pulling the chariot tore into the four of us first, killing the last two standing warriors, Barbug and Karkuk. I leapt over their bodies and had at the chariot. I couldn't reach the shaman, but I broke the snouts of the boars and one of its wheels. Mighty Onraug faced the remaining Gore alone with grim anger and fell beneath a deluge of blades and bodies.
We saw him fall as we finished off the dogs. It was a fine death.
Aye, it was a fine death. The crew of the organ gun too were overwhelmed and died in far from pleasant ways, leaving Gurtok to face the ambushing beastmen. There was nothing more to be done. We retreated. Gurtok's protégés came to his aid, setting light to a large keg of black powder that lay next to the stricken gun and, loudly, if ineffectively, exploding it. In the resulting miasma of dirt and debris, we, the wounded as well as those who still stood, were able to flee. The beasts, too, fled in surprise, no doubt. Today was an ignominious day. Let us drink to honor the fallen tonight, and then plan our vengeance tomorrow. Kadarg, can we count on your blade? Do you wish to avenge your brother?
Aye, I do. You can count on my blade.
To be continued.